Hello everyone, I'm very glad to be here. My name is Pedro, and today we'll be discussing musical smart city perspectives on ubiquitous sonification. So, what in fact are we talking about here? Smart cities can be described as urban areas with sensor networks that collect data towards an efficient management of assets and resources. Within smart cities, data is ubiquitous and heterogeneous, and these might present opportunities to increase citizens' awareness of the environment and consequently their well being. However, making sense of smart city data is challenging for a layperson, and in this process of interpreting smart city data, there is clearly a dominance of visual culture over oral culture. Moreover, there's a deficit regarding the use of the audio modality in this context. This introduction led us to frame the following research question: how can we use the audio modality, specifically music, to make sense of the Internet of Things data in the context of smart cities? In order to start thinking about this problem, a first step was to carry out a literature survey focused on three major topics: sonification, smart cities, and ubiquitous music and mobile music. So, what in fact are smart cities? Literature shows that there is no formal, unified definition of what constitutes a smart city. They do agree that smart cities share the paradigm of data available everywhere. A trivial smart city ecosystem may consist of sensors for infrastructures, mobility, environment, services, and user devices, and these sensors are embedded in the civic environment or worn by the person. In this sense, both citizens and engineered sensors act as a source of data. Regarding ubiquitous music, as most of you are aware, it focuses on the music available everywhere paradigm. And, as described by Pimenta et al., in ubiquitous music, a device is an agent that adapts itself to the musical activity, to the local environment, and to other agents that interact with it. In mobile music, we often experience the use of mobile devices that act as interfaces towards music creation and listening. Its location based nature is particularly important here. Often sound experiences that are normally driven by GPS, where users' movement in specific zones trigger playback of sound or music. Regarding sonification, it can be defined as the use of non-speech audio to convey information, the definition proposed by Gregory Kramer in the 90s. Some common techniques of sonification are audification, where there's a direct mapping of data points to sound pressure levels; parameter mapping sonification, which is the most common type of sonification, where data points are mapped to parameters of the sonification, such as pitch or tempo, for example; model-based sonification, where we use an acoustic model that generates an output when excited; and auditory icons, understood as oral metaphors in which the sound that is heard is a representation of an event. As for the main used tools, literature suggests SuperCollider, Pure Data, and Max MSP. A survey about interactive sonification publications in which a user can interactively manipulate the data's transformation into sound was also carried out. And finally, we also covered musification, which can be seen as a sonification technique that uses scales, chords, key, and tempo changes, as proposed by Stephen Barras, or as an organized sonification, which leverages Edgar Vallé's definition of music as organized sound, this definition being proposed by Nuria Bonet. To illustrate the dichotomy between a purely informational sonification and one that is more concerned with the aesthetic merits of the composition, in this slide we have on the left one well-established example of sonification, the Geiger-Müller counter, here representing the focus on the conveyance of information. On the opposite right, we have a piece by Brazilian composer Heitor Villa-Lobos from 1957, where the musician translates the New York City skyline into notes on the piano. This last example is clearly more concerned with the artistic aspect. Finally, In our vision of a musical smart city, if there would be a compromise between one or the other sides of this spectrum, we would opt for an emphasis on the aesthetics as depicted by the orange circle on the grid. To achieve a vision of a musical smart city, we propose a definition of ubiquitous sonification as a type of sonification that leverages ubiquitous computing environments, where a user is permanently immersed in a personal, unobtrusive digital space. We would also like to point out that ubiquitous sonification is different from ubiquitous music, for the first has a component of information conveyance and doesn't focus only on the musical value of the system. There are also synergies with interactive sonification due to the fact that the user is part of the digital space. Thus, our vision of a musical smart city is a location-based system that is able to increase inhabitants' urban awareness within a city, while at the same time accounting for an exploration of their environment in a musical way. To reach this vision, we start by dividing the space into two distinct components: environment-driven ubiquitous sonification, what we also call the outer space, and is related with data from inhabitants' surroundings, such as air pollution, crime rate, land usage, urban traffic, and user-driven ubiquitous sonification, also called the inner space, more concerned with users' physiological, inertial, and location data provided by smart wearable devices and phones, things such as heart rate, hand gestures, head movement, and location. Here, we could use machine learning techniques for dimensionality reduction purposes, given the fact that datasets might be too big to handle, in order to extract higher level features from it. Or we could use machine learning and AI as compositional tools, implementing deep learning systems for music generation that account for some degree of control. Finally, this will result in the combination of both environment-driven and user-driven ubiquitous sonification, having a user interface to mediate interaction with listeners. For this, we aim to minimize the visual display, making the interface as unobtrusive as possible, trying to stir the users away from the screen. As for the challenges related with this vision, we enlist four major difficulties: data gathering and characterization, related with Internet of Things data streams and their nature, temporal and spatial scales, reflecting on their suitability for sonification; user requirement identification, taking into account what city aspects users would like to learn more about or experience in an enhanced way when using the auditory modality; artificial intelligence for sonification and musification, where can we apply it; dimensionality reduction, as stated before; cross-model mappings between different types of data; deep learning for music generation; and finally, design and evaluation of the system, how to investigate the system's ability to convey information about a given subject and also assess its creative and aesthetic merits. These are all key points to be kept in mind towards the deployment of a musical smart city. Some progress was done on the side, namely a prototype of a sonification of air pollution levels from 1 week of 2019 and 1 week of 2020, these values being measured at a station in Mile End Road, London. This was programmed using the Bella board, designed for ultra low latency and high quality audio, and the code was written in C++. For the sonification process, we used a musical borrowing procedure where a spectral delay effect is applied on the piece Air on the G string by Johann Sebastian Bach and is controlled by NO2 values. What you will hear is a snippet, for the sake of time, changing from a period in the week of 2019 to the same week of 2020. Higher values of air pollution increase the gain and feedback of the delay effect, and lower values render the audio closer to the original, hence less sonically polluted, if you will. All the code and material is available online. In conclusion, with this paper, we presented a literature survey on the topics of smart cities, ubiquitous music, mobile music, and sonification. We started a debate over the distinctions between musification and sonification, and we proposed a definition of ubiquitous sonification. Finally, we presented a vision towards a musical smart city system, discussing its challenges and future work. These are the references of this presentation. Thank you for your attention.